House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Eternal Father, sovereign God, enable us this day to see each other as you see us. Though we be broken or belligerent, contentious or callous, demanding or discouraged, nonetheless you regard us with unconditional love. In your sight, we, your children, are your creation, the apple of your eye. We may at times be lost, but not unloved, careless, yet held in your embrace, mortal, and yet made righteous in you. With your eyes may we live into the love you have shown us. With your words may we speak with the grace you have given us. And in your spirit may we meet others with the same mercy you have offered us. And as we follow where you lead us, serving in this time and this place, may we bear witness to the holiness to which you have called each of us. In your steadfast loving kindness we receive in your name, we offer these prayers. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Sergeant John Daniker of Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Sergeant Daniker served as a waist gunner for the 565th Bombardment Squadron, 389th Bombardment Group during World War II. On June 20th, 1944, his bomber crashed into the Baltic Sea off the coast of Denmark. Sergeant Daniker was initially declared non-recoverable after investigations into the crash were unable to locate the crewman. In 2019, Danish divers alerted the Royal Danish Navy of a World War II-era aircraft wreckage in the general area of where Sergeant Daniker's aircraft went down. From May 2024 to June 2024, the Royal Danish Navy, the Department of Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, and their partners were able to recover the remains from the aircraft. On December 10th, 2024, Sergeant Daniker was positively identified through DNA analysis. Last week, on August 26th, Sergeant Daniker was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Mr. Speaker, we must never stop searching for those who made the ultimate sacrifice. I'm grateful to all involved for bringing Sergeant Daniker home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The success by President Donald Trump for peace and prosperity in the Middle East is being implemented by American patriot Ambassador Tom Barrack, as I witnessed firsthand last week in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. Our bipartisan bicameral delegation led by Senator Jane Shaheen visited with inspiring leaders like King Abdullah in Amman, President Ahmad al-Shara in Damascus, and President Joseph Aoun in Beirut. Jordan is appreciated as a prosperous, long-time American ally. Syria is advancing to include all communities and religions into a unified nation. With the dictator Assad fleeing to Moscow, President Trump promotes "Give Syria a Chance." Lebanon is fulfilling its pledge to disarm Hezbollah by year-end. Ambassador Barrack is successfully isolating Iran as Iran chants "Death to Israel, death to America." In conclusion, God bless our troops as the global war on terrorism continues. Trump is reinstituting existing laws to protect American families with peace through strength, revealing war criminal Putin lies. Insulting Trump and mocking Trump murdering Ukrainian civilians with rocket attacks as he conducts lovely conversations. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. For what purposes does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with immense pride to honor San Angelo, Texas native and commander of the 449th Aviation Support Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Jordan Boyd, as well as 2 extraordinary National Guard units, the 108th Assault Helicopter Battalion in Austin and the 149th General Support Helicopter Battalion in San Antonio. These units are extraordinary. On the morning of July 4th, as floodwaters devastated Central and West Texas, these 2 units immediately jumped into action and have not stopped since then. Knowing many of the stranded children were present at that time, these crews pushed themselves to every imaginable limit, flying through adverse weather to reach Camp Mystic and the entire Guadalupe River. Their daring efforts saved 366 lives that day and reunited hundreds of families. And I just want to say thank you, not just to the pilots, but also to the maintainers, the support personnel, and all of the people in the Texas National Guard that have just shown immense heroism over the past few months. And can't say thank you enough for their heroic efforts. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair lays before the House a communication.
To the Congress of the United States. Mr. Speaker, I am providing official notice of my intent to withdraw from the House Homeland Security Committee effective immediately. Over the course of my 9 years in Congress, I have been a dedicated servant to we the people through the House Homeland Security Committee, fighting for the American First agenda, enforcement of American law, and security of American sovereignty. My Republican colleagues have chosen an alternate path for the committee that I helped to build, a path more in alignment with the less conservative factions of our conference, factions whose core principles are quite variant from my own conservative perspective on key issues like amnesty, ICE operations, and opposition to the surveillance state. Therefore, recognizing that I would be in opposition to the core principles and agenda of the newly elected chairman, I withdraw my presence from the House Homeland Security Committee. Signed sincerely, Clay Higgins, Member of Congress.
Without objection, the resignation is accepted. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess subject to call of the Chair.
The House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4215.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4215, a bill to require the Secretary of State to promulgate expedited and fixed timelines for the decision-making process to license the export of certain defense articles and defense services and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I introduced the International Traffic in Arms Regulation Licensing Reform Act to improve licensing timelines and processes for direct commercial defense sales. America's foreign defense sales program is notorious for its slow timelines and opaque process. This lack of clarity about how foreign partners are prioritized causes frustration and confusion amongst our most important partners and allies. This inefficiency and murkiness forces our partners to consider turning to other countries to source their capabilities. The U.S. is currently the partner of choice for foreign arms sales, but that status is in jeopardy due to internal delays and unnecessary bureaucratic red tape. The direct commercial sales process presents a more efficient and expedient pathway for our allies and partners to purchase U.S. technology. Direct commercial sales is the future of American defense sales. Direct commercial sales skyrocketed last year and are quickly outpacing other forms of defense sales. If our direct commercial sales program is going to continue to grow, more must be done to streamline direct commercial sales and incentivize even faster timelines. This legislation would codify President Trump's April 9th executive order to establish a list of priority partners for certain defense sales and would create a time-bound process for approving direct commercial sales cases. I urge my colleagues to support our defense industrial base and support this common-sense bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 4215. This bill will institute clearer timeframes for the licensing decisions made by the State Department for direct sales of defense items by private firms to foreign buyers. While large systems like aircraft, ships, tanks, and missiles are principally provided via the Foreign Military Sales, or FMS, process, a number of important items such as small arms, vehicles, radars, and other equipment are transferred via direct commercial sales. These items are often vital for our partners and allies to replenish their military stocks and defensive capabilities. And while the vast majority of these sales are processed and licensed in the expeditious manner, foreign partners often seek greater speed and clarity regarding the process. This bill simply institutes reasonable time frames of up to 60 days for a licensing decision to be made. This does not preordain an outcome. The State Department can still either return such licenses for adjustment or modification due to additional revisions or controls determined necessary, or reject the request license outright. Crucially, the bill also does not alter or undermine congressional oversight over direct commercial sales. In short, while I have strong concerns about the arms sales and security assistance policies of the Trump administration, I support efforts to provide our allies and partners with improved timelines and processing for defense articles that they need for our shared national security goals. So I encourage my colleagues to join me in supporting this measure and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and will continue to reserve until the gentleman yields back his time.
Gentleman from Washington reserves.
I have no speakers either. Ready to close.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing. The time period limitations on direct foreign commercial sales set forth in this bill will, in fact, provide greater clarity for our allies and a more rapid delivery of necessary items to our partners around the world. Moreover, the bill does so without undermining congressional oversight or predetermining any decisions. So I support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York yields back. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we must do everything we can to improve our foreign defense sales process to ensure American competitiveness and equip our allies with the highest quality defense materials. I am proud to sponsor this legislation to streamline the direct commercial sales process, and I urge my colleagues to join me in support of it. This legislation makes America safer and our economy wealthier. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4215? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4216 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4216, a bill to direct the Secretary of State, in coordination with the Secretary of Defense, to carry out a review of the list of defense articles and services required to be transferred under the Foreign Military Sales Program, as opposed to direct commercial sale FMS only list.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this legislation to improve the foreign military sales process. When our partners and allies choose to procure U.S. origin defense articles or services, they have a choice to purchase items via the foreign military sales process or the direct commercial sales process. While foreign military sales is often the path of choice due to the robust total package approach, direct commercial sales is preferable in many cases as it is faster and a more nimble process than foreign military sales. However, the State Department maintains an out-of-date list of defense articles that may only be purchased via foreign military sales. This list is meant to only include the most sensitive technologies that would pose a risk to U.S. competitiveness or national security if these technologies fell into the wrong hands. However, its outdated nature ends up creating the very problem it seeks to avoid. U.S. competitiveness is limited as our partners choose to turn to other sources for technologies that are too slow to procure from the U.S. President Trump's April 9th executive order mandated the State Department review and update the foreign military sales only list. This legislation would codify that requirement and go one step further by requiring an annual review of the list. This legislation would also enhance congressional reporting requirements to ensure that Congress has oversight over any changes to the list. This much-needed legislation is a key part of reforming our foreign defense sales process to ensure the U.S. maintains its competitiveness and remains the global partner of choice for procurement of defense technology. As a member of the Foreign Arms Sales Task Force, I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 4216. This bill directs the Department of State to conduct an annual review in consultation with the Department of Defense of what weapons and technologies can be moved from the FMS-only list to be eligible for direct commercial sales. It also requires helpful reporting to Congress on the process and evaluation of these changes. Importantly, it does not modify or undermine Congress's oversight or visibility into the proposed arms transfers. The context behind this bill is very important. Our country provides defense articles and services to our allies and partners via foreign military sales, often abbreviated to FMS. U.S. FMS cases offer a unique approach which include not only the most capable military platforms to our friends, but what has historically been known as the total package approach. This refers to the fact that the United States, via FMS sales, provides not only the military hardware itself, but a total package that includes training, repairs, and maintenance support, as well as capacity building for that nation's military. Our adversaries, quite simply, do not and often cannot provide both such exquisite technologies, but also the whole suite of support that comes with them. The advanced technology, as well as the total package approach and our diplomatic influence, values, and position sets us apart. And while FMS transfers are fit for many cases and situations, some foreign partners have sought to expand their defense purchases via greater direct commercial sales from U.S. firms. And while these steps need to be taken carefully, the review required by this bill is a smart step in the right direction, of which I support. So I encourage my colleagues to join in supporting this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from South Carolina, the sponsor of this legislation, Representative Biggs.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, President Trump made it clear to put American jobs first and to cut the Washington red tape. And I'm proud to say that my bill delivers by turning the President's executive order into law and investing in American workers. The Made in America Defense Act strengthens domestic manufacturing. It supports our allies, and it advances our national security, all by cutting through a Washington bureaucracy that too often slows us down. Here's the bottom line. This bill will produce more jobs for our tradesmen and boost manufacturing in South Carolina and across the nation. For South Carolina's 3rd District, it means good jobs for welders, machinists, and engineers. It means new orders coming into counties like Anderson, Greenwood, Newberry, and Oconee, and many other hardworking blue-collar communities all across the nation. And importantly, it means America's best equipment reaching our allies faster than ever before. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I have no further witnesses and ready to close at the time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and will continue to reserve until the gentleman yields back his time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purposes of closing, but I'll be very, very brief. This legislation provides a useful directive while maintaining congressional prerogatives and oversight over arms sales. And I hope that all of my colleagues will join me and support this bill. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York yields back. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, reforming America's foreign defense sales is a top priority of this administration. We must do our part to codify the improvements initiated by President Trump. I am proud to support this legislation to improve the foreign defense system, and I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4216 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed and without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 747 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 747, a bill to impose sanctions with respect to Chinese producers of synthetic opioids and opioid precursors to hold Chinese officials accountable for the spread of illicit fentanyl and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Bumgardner, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I also ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record exchanges of letters with other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of Representative Barr's Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act of 2025. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. It's killing over 70,000 Americans a year, and it's flooding into our communities with deadly force. We know where it's coming from. The vast majority of illegal fentanyl in the U.S. originates in China. Chinese labs manufacture the chemicals, Chinese traffickers supply the cartels, and American families pay the price in lives lost. This bill holds the Chinese Communist Party accountable. It gives our government stronger tools to sanction Chinese entities involved in the fentanyl trade and puts pressure on the CCP to shut down the labs that fuel this crisis. It's time to treat this for what it is, a national security threat. The Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act sends a clear message. The United States will not sit back while foreign actors profit from American pain. I urge my colleagues to support this critical legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 747 as amended. The opioid crisis has claimed too many lives. We've seen some real progress the last few years, in part because of domestic and international policies put in place by President Biden, including getting President Xi to do more to stop fentanyl precursors from reaching our shores. Of course, the issue is far from solved. This bill will strengthen sanctions on major Chinese producers of fentanyl and those who aid and abet opioid traffickers. If you are knowingly sending deadly chemicals to American citizens, you absolutely must be sanctioned. And I would encourage President Trump and Secretary Bassett to focus more on this issue. That said, we cannot sanction our way out of the fentanyl crisis. Sanctions are an important tool, but cooperation is essential. If we want countries to limit fentanyl precursors, exports, and prevent these substances from entering our communities, we need the active partnership of law enforcement in nations like China and Mexico. This is just a simple fact. Tough talk has its place, but effective diplomacy and law enforcement cooperation are indispensable. So let me be clear. Use of military force is not a viable solution. But I want to thank my friend, Representative Barr, for his advocacy on this important issue. Congress works on behalf of the American people best when we work together, and Mr. Barr and I work together on several issues in this Congress, and both sides worked in good faith to get this bill done last Congress and again here today. So I encourage my colleagues to support this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Kentucky, the sponsor of this fine piece of legislation, Mr. Barr.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Washington State and Chairman Mast for supporting the legislation. I thank my friend, the gentleman from New York, the ranking member, for his bipartisan support as well. And I rise today in support of my legislation, H.R. 747, the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act. The fentanyl crisis is one of the most significant threats to our country, and it continues to plague families and neighbors across the United States. Kentucky, sadly, my home state, has been ravaged by the fentanyl crisis. Drug overdoses are the leading cause of death for Americans age 18 to 45, and fentanyl is responsible for nearly 70% of these deaths. Last year, the DEA seized more than 60 million fentanyl-laced fake pills in the United States, almost 80,000 pounds of fentanyl powder, equal to more than 380 million lethal doses of fentanyl. As of last month, the 2025 seizures of fentanyl equate to over 232 million deadly doses. 70,000 of our fellow Americans succumbed to this poison. And as we know, in 2024, over 1,400 Kentuckians lost their lives to a drug overdose, including fentanyl. And unfortunately, this scourge has spread with the help of our greatest strategic adversary, the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party. As a member of the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition with the Chinese Communist Party, we conducted an investigation. And that investigation in the last Congress established that the PRC government, under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, directly subsidizes the manufacturing and export of illicit fentanyl materials and other synthetic narcotics through tax rebates. Many of these substances are illegal under the PRC's own laws and have no known legal use worldwide. Like its export tax rebates for legitimate goods, the CCP's subsidies of illegal drugs incentivizes international synthetic drug sales from the People's Republic of China. And the CCP never disclosed this program. In addition, the Select Committee found that the CCP gave monetary grants and awards to companies openly trafficking illicit fentanyl materials and other synthetic narcotics. There are even examples of some of these companies enjoying site visits from provincial PRC government officials who complimented them for their impact on the provincial economy. The CCP holds an ownership interest in several PRC companies tied to drug trafficking, including PRC government prison connected to human rights abuses, owning a drug trafficking chemical company and a publicly traded PRC company hosting thousands of instances of open drug trafficking on its sites. The PRC failed to prosecute fentanyl and precursor manufacturers. Rather than investigating drug traffickers, the government of the PRC security services have not cooperated with U.S. law enforcement and have even notified targets of U.S. investigations when they receive requests for assistance. The PRC allows for the open sale of fentanyl precursors and other illicit materials on the extensively monitored and controlled PRC internet. A review of just 7 e-commerce sites found that over 31,000 instances of PRC companies selling illicit chemicals with obvious ties to drug trafficking. Undercover communications with PRC drug trafficking companies revealed an eagerness to engage in clearly illicit drug sales with no fear of reprisal. And the government in China censors content about domestic drug sales, but leaves export-focused narcotics content untouched. So we know that China has historically been and remains a primary source of fentanyl in global circulation through the production of these precursor chemicals and outsourcing of final production to cartel labs in Mexico. That's why it's paramount that Congress pass my legislation that's being considered here today, the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act. My bill amends the Fentanyl Sanctions Act to expand the definition of foreign opioid trafficker to include certain Chinese entities and government officials that fail to take steps to prevent opioid trafficking, subjecting them to sanctions. The bill also requires the President to determine whether the heads of the National Narcotics Control Commission, the Ministry of Public Security, the General Administration of Customs, and the National Medical Products Administration of the government of the PRC are foreign opioid traffickers. We must attack the production of fentanyl by targeting the source of precursors in China. Chinese producers of synthetic opioids and opioid precursors and senior government and Chinese political officials' culpability does not end when their precursor products land in Mexico or illegally cross our southern border. We must look at every step of fentanyl's deadly supply chain and hold our adversaries accountable. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I have no further witnesses, so I reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and will continue to reserve until the gentleman yields back his time.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purposes of closing. As I've indicated, I support this bill because sanctions have a role in curbing the opioid crises, but they are only a sliver of the solution. And with that, I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York yields back. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act of 2025 is not just about policy. It's about saving American lives. We must hold China accountable for its role in this deadly epidemic. Congress must take a stand against the poison devastating our communities. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 747 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed.
Yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2643 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2643, a bill to require the Secretary of State to submit an annual report to Congress regarding the ties between criminal gangs and political and economic elites in Haiti and impose sanctions on political and economic elites involved in such criminal activities.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I also ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record exchanges of letters with other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I support H.R. 2643, the Haiti Criminal Collusion Transparency Act, introduced by Ranking Member Meeks, because it advances a clear bipartisan goal: exposing and sanctioning the corrupt political and economic elites in Haiti who have fueled the country's ongoing gang crisis. This is not just about Haiti, it's about protecting U.S. national security. The chaos in Port-au-Prince is creating regional instability. Haitians are fleeing the island using criminal networks to traffic them and others to our southern border. These actors threaten the safety of Haitian people and the interests of the United States. To its credit, the Trump administration responded swiftly. Within days of taking office, it approved nearly $41 million to support the Haitian National Police and the Kenyan-led Multinational Security Support Mission. It also issued a humanitarian waiver to keep emergency relief flowing. This bill complements those efforts by requiring the State Department to identify and report on individual gangs tied to gang activity and to impose sanctions on those responsible. It targets the enablers of violence and provides Congress with the information needed to act decisively. Meanwhile, the administration is prioritizing stronger oversight of U.S. foreign assistance to Haiti, an essential effort to ensure taxpayer funds are not misused. By identifying and sanctioning corrupt actors, this bill helps ensure that U.S. aid does not end up in the hands of those fueling the instability. It reinforces the broader objective of holding accountable the networks behind Haiti's collapse. I appreciate the bipartisan leadership on this legislation and recognize its importance in confronting the crisis head-on. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of H.R. 2643, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. This legislation would require the State Department to develop a report detailing the ties between political and economic elite in Haiti and the criminal gangs that have run roughshod over the majority of the capital. Each day, the situation in Haiti gets worse. Approximately 1.3 million Haitians, including more than 700,000 children, have now been forced out of their homes by gang violence. Just since last October, gangs have killed more than 5,600 innocent Haitians. Gang activity is no longer confined to the outskirts of Port-au-Prince, expanding into cities once free from violence. Gangs able to outgun the Haitian National Police continue to launch heavily armed attacks on ports, highways, critical infrastructure, police stations, courthouses, prisons, hospitals, businesses, and neighborhoods. They have committed a gruesome massacres against senior citizens, and for more than a year now have dictated Haiti's security and political tempo. Not everyone in Haiti has suffered at the hands of gangs. Members of the political and economic elite who have enabled, armed, and benefited from the unrest in Haiti are also to blame for the ongoing crises. Should the State Department find criminal collusion between members of Haiti's political and economic elite and the gangs, the legislation requires that the administration place sanctions on those individuals. It would deny entry to the United States to those who are found to support gang activity, who use kidnappings and rape to control and silence communities, and who use coercion to bring youth in and around the Port-au-Prince into the service of criminal activity. We ignore the ongoing crises in Haiti at our own peril. We have a duty to make sure that we identify and hold accountable those who perpetuate chaos. And so I thank my colleagues for working in a bipartisan manner, because this is the right thing to do. And I encourage my colleagues to join me in supporting this bipartisan measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I have no more speakers and will continue to reserve until the gentleman yields back his time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing. Mr.
The gentleman
Speaker,
is recognized.
we cannot allow the criminal gangs in Haiti and those powerful political and economic elites who have enabled and empowered them to inflict violence and chaos on Haiti with impunity. Impunity must stop. The people of Haiti must believe that they have the opportunity to chart a path to a secure, a stable, and democratic future, and that gangs will not be allowed to rule and dictate the reality on the ground. The people of Haiti are waiting and want to hear our voices and to know that those who are committing the crimes or enable them to be committed cannot just continue to go back and forth from Haiti to the United States and move around with impunity. This will send a message to them that they will be held accountable for what and how they are destroying the lives and livelihood and opportunities for the hardworking people of Haiti. And so with that, I strongly support this bill and encourage my colleagues to support it as well. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York yields back. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I thank Representative Meeks for this fine piece of legislation and appreciate his bipartisan spirit. I urge my colleagues to pass the Haiti Criminal Collusion Transparency Act and make clear that the United States will expose and hold accountable those who fund, enable, and profit from gang violence in Haiti. We will shine a light on the criminal networks undermining regional stability and ensure there are consequences for those who collude with them. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2643 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2503.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2503, a bill to require the development of a strategy to eliminate the availability to foreign adversaries of goods and technologies capable of supporting undersea cables and for other purposes.
To the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise today in strong support of Representative Kane's Undersea Cable Control Act. Over 99% of the world's data that crosses the oceans travels through the fiber optic cables that sit on the sea floor. This bill requires the U.S. to develop and execute a strategy to protect this critical infrastructure. America's adversaries are working around the clock to control these communication checkpoints. Chinese companies like HMN Technologies, formerly known as Huawei Marine Networks, are estimated to be building or repairing about a quarter of the world's undersea cables. There have been documented instances of the Chinese manipulating and spying on these networks, with internet traffic being rerouted through China. It is important that we identify what the Chinese Communist Party needs to deploy undersea cables so that we can ensure only America and its allies lead in the development and maintenance of this technology. I urge my colleagues to support Representative Kane's fine bill to begin this process of protecting this critical infrastructure and vulnerable infrastructure. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2503. Communication systems and access to the Internet are highly dependent on undersea cables. 99% of intercontinental data travels via undersea fiber optic cables on the ocean floor. It goes without saying that control and manufacture of these cables matter, not just for economic development, but will matter in any conflict. The United States, with allies and partners, must maintain strategic independence and should seek to become the primary source of this critical infrastructure. This bill will force the Bureau of Industry and Security to provide a study along these lines, which is long overdue. I encourage my colleagues to join in supporting this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, the sponsor of this fine legislation, Mr. Kane.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2503, the Undersea Cable Control Act. Undersea cables have long been an integral part of America's transcontinental communication and data transmission. The Undersea Cable Control Act is a crucial, bipartisan piece of legislation that is designed to protect U.S. national security and to ensure continued U.S. technological leadership. By limiting our foreign adversaries' access to undersea cable infrastructure, we can protect U.S. leadership from the influence of adversarial governments like the Chinese Communist Party. I think that we can all agree, regardless of which side of the aisle you stand on, that there is a need to ensure that technologies critical to America's telecommunications infrastructure do not end up in the wrong hands. Undersea cables carry approximately 99% of transoceanic digital traffic, enabling $10 trillion in daily financial transactions and contributing hundreds of billions of dollars to the U.S. economy every year. Undersea cable infrastructure has become the digital backbone of the modern global economy. Recent attacks on the transcontinental cables have exposed vulnerabilities in the framework, however. This bill directs the Commerce Department and the State Department to develop a strategy to eliminate adversarial access to the key technologies used in undersea cables. This strengthens our export controls, requires transparency and public reporting, and promotes collaboration with our allies abroad to ensure that our standards and our infrastructure are secure. I would like to thank Chairman Mast of the House Foreign Affairs Committee for his authorship of this bill during the 118th Congress. I'm honored to continue the legacy that he began. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
From Washington reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I have no further speakers and am ready to close if the other side has no more speakers.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I have no more speakers and will continue to reserve until the gentleman yields back his time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing.
Gentleman is recognized.
I support this bill on undersea cables and believe it's a smart step to develop a strategy for American economic statecraft in this important area. And I yield back the balance of my time.
From Texas yields back. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Undersea Cable Control Act will ensure America, not the Chinese Communist Party, is connecting the globe with critical undersea cable infrastructure. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2503. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4490 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4490, a bill to amend International Organizations Immunities Act to extend diplomatic privileges and immunities to certain additional international and regional organizations and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise today in strong support of the Partner Act, a forward-looking measure that strengthens America's ties with the international organizations shaping the global order at a moment when international competition is sharper than ever. This legislation gives our nation the ability to fully engage with influential regional international bodies, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, the Pacific Islands Forum, the Caribbean Community, and the African Union, by extending to them the same diplomatic privileges afforded under the International Organizations Immunities Act. In doing so, we signal not only respect for their importance, but also our determination to work alongside them as equal partners in tackling shared challenges. These organizations are central to addressing pressing issues that do not stop at our borders, from advancing security and prosperity to fostering innovation and confronting global health threats. If the United States is to lead effectively in this century, we cannot remain on the sidelines. We must be present in the rooms where decisions are being made, ready to cooperate and ready to lead. This bill ensures that our diplomats and institutions are equipped to do exactly that. I encourage my partners to join me in supporting the Partner Act and reaffirming America's commitment to principled, enduring international leadership. I reserve the balance of my time.
From Washington reserves, the gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the Partner Act. This is a bipartisan bill supported by colleagues on both sides of the aisle that strengthens American diplomacy, science, and leadership in the world. The Partner Act does something very simple but very important. It extends basic legal protections, known as privileges and immunities, to several key international organizations that the United States works closely with, but that until now have lacked the same recognition that we give to other multilateral institutions. And so let me explain why this is very important. These legal protections are not special favors. They are the standard tools that allow international organizations to do their work effectively and independently. They protect institutions from lawsuits, taxation, or other interference that could disrupt their missions, while still ensuring that individuals remain accountable for their own private actions. And they are reciprocal. Just as American diplomats and officials enjoy these protections when we serve in international organizations abroad, we extend them to our partners here in the United States. It's the basic infrastructure of diplomacy. And why is this bill important right now? First, our strategic interest in the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, is central to U.S. engagement in Asia. Recognizing its diplomatic status here in the United States shows our commitment to the region's future and to working with our Asian partners on equal footing. Second, the Western Hemisphere, of which we are part, obviously is incredibly important to the United States. CARICOM, the Caribbean community, plays a crucial role in democratic governance, regional security, and disaster preparedness. Extending privileges and immunities supports CARICOM as a unified voice for the Caribbean and strengthens U.S. ties to a region where our influence should be felt through real, consistent engagement. Third, science and technology leadership. CERN, which is the European Organization for Nuclear Research, is one of the world's premier scientific organizations. It is partnering with the United States researchers on the deep underground neutrino experiment, a $3 billion project based right here in the United States. This is some of the most important and cutting-edge physics research in the world that will, hopefully, allow us to better understand the universe. By extending privileges and immunities to CERN, we can speed up the timeline for this groundbreaking work, control costs, and ensure that American scientists remain at the forefront of the discovery. Fourth, our Pacific and African partners. This bill authorizes the President to extend protections to the Pacific Islands Forum, a vital regional body in the South Pacific where small island nations are on the front lines of climate change and facing significant diplomatic overtures by China. And the bill fixes a gap in U.S. law by ensuring the African Union's observer mission to the United Nations in New York receives the same recognition as the AU itself. Taken together, these provisions make clear that the United States values our partnerships and will invest in multilateral cooperation that advances our interests and our American values. Mr. Speaker, Congress has extended privileges and immunities before to the European Union, to the African Union, and of course to the United Nations and the Organization of American States. This bill simply applies that same standard to other organizations that the United States works with every single day. At a time when our competitors are working overtime to expand their influence in Asia, the Caribbean, the Pacific, and Africa, we cannot afford to sit back. The Partner Act is a concrete step to strengthen U.S. leadership, deepen our alliances, and keep America at the center of global diplomacy and science. I want to thank all of my colleagues, Democrat and Republican, for their leadership and for their work on this bill. This bill has broad bipartisan support. It's good for American diplomacy, good for American science, and good for American leadership in the world. I urge all of my colleagues to vote yes on the Partner Act, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from California, Representative Kim.
Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleague, Representative Baumgartner, for yielding. I rise in strong support of H.R. 4490, the Partner Act. This bill represents a bold and necessary commitment to strengthening America's engagement with our allies and partner organizations worldwide by granting tailored immunities and privileges. Of note is the inclusion of provisions from the Partner with ASEAN Act and the Pacific Partnership Act, which together elevate U.S. cooperation with our Indo-Pacific allies. The Indo-Pacific is home to over half the world's population, vital trade routes, and rapidly growing economies and markets. It is a region that I hold as a key priority as chair of the East Asia and the Pacific of the House Foreign Affairs Committee due to its significance to national security and economic prosperity. Meanwhile, the region also faces significant challenges, including rising geopolitical tensions, maritime disputes, and growing coercion from bad actors seeking to undermine a rules-based order. This bill is long overdue and sends a strong message that the United States will stand shoulder to shoulder with our friends, including our Indo-Pacific partners, from the Philippines to Palau, to promote a free, open, and prosperous region. This bill is not just about diplomatic immunities, it is about American leadership on the global stage. And I'm proud to co-lead this bill with Representative Castro, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, Representative Bill Foster.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Ranking Member Castro, Representative Kim, and Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 4490, the Partner Act. This legislation represents an important step forward in our country's ability to collaborate with international partners. In particular, this legislation contains the text of our Strengthening Science Through Diplomacy Act, which simplifies our scientific collaboration with CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. As a physicist, I spent more than 2 decades working with colleagues from around the globe at Fermilab in Illinois, where international scientific collaboration allowed us to better understand each other and the universe that we are embedded in. CERN already partners with several of our national laboratories, including Argonne National Lab and Fermi National Lab in the 11th District of Illinois that I represent. In particular, this bill will allow for closer collaboration with CERN on the Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment, also known as DUNE, an international flagship experiment. DUNE will help us discover more about the nature of subatomic particles known as neutrinos, which could help us understand fundamental questions about the origin of matter and the beginnings of the universe. It will also search for previously undetectable modes of proton decay, the subject for which I received my PhD thesis many moons ago. This legislation will allow CERN to send its scientists who have been working on the DUNE project to assist in person as these experiments come online. And one of the most exciting things about the DUNE project is we don't know what it will discover. When we built our proton decay detector many moons ago, we did not know that 160,000 years ago, a star blew up, went supernova in the Greater Magellanic Cloud, and for 160,000 years, the flash of light from that stellar explosion and the burst of neutrinos traveled toward the Earth. It arrived in 1987, where the astronomers saw the flash of light, and we saw in our underground detector the burst of neutrinos. So we learned an incredible thing about these stellar explosions. And it's this sort of thing that brings me and brings other young people into science. So I'd really like to thank Ranking Member Castro, as well as Representative Dusty Johnson of the great state of South Dakota, who worked with me over the last few years to ensure the success of this legislation. This bipartisan effort is an important step in solidifying our partnership with CERN and maintaining our nation's role as a leader in scientific research. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I have no more speakers and will continue to reserve until the gentleman yields back his time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I'd like to yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purposes of closing.
The gentleman is recognized.
I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas yields back. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues, Representative Castro and Representative Kim, for introducing this important bill. I urge my colleagues to support it and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4490 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4233.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4233, a bill to modify provisions relating to defense trade and cooperation among Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Bumgartner, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
And I'd like to yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this legislation to improve implementation of the AUKUS partnership. The AUKUS partnership is a groundbreaking defense partnership between the United States, the UK, and Australia, created with the intention of keeping a free and open Indo-Pacific and strengthening defense trade between the U.S. and our closest allies. The AUKUS partnership presents a unique opportunity for the U.S. to strengthen our relationship with our AUKUS partners, ensure interoperability with our most important allies in any future conflict, and promote innovation in defense technology. While Congress codified the AUKUS partnership last year, AUKUS has faced numerous challenges in its implementation due to bureaucratic red tape. Since its implementation, we have worked closely with our foreign partners and the Trump administration to discuss the challenges AUKUS Pillar 2 has faced. This legislation addresses these challenges and will ensure that the AUKUS partnership is implemented according to the original intent of the partner countries, allowing the U.S. defense industry and our allies to take full advantage of the benefits of this agreement. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 4233. The AUKUS agreement established by the Biden administration was a historic accomplishment, and Congress has played an important and constructive role in laying the legislative foundation for closer cooperation between the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. With this latest legislative effort, Representatives Kim and Dean are continuing and furthering that legacy and promoting a free and prosperous Indo-Pacific. AUKUS is an important way to bolster our alliance structure in East Asia and the Pacific and do what we do best as a nation, work with our allies towards a common cause, in this case, a free and open Indo-Pacific. The AUKUS agreement accomplishes these ends by providing Australia with additional submarine training and technology in Pillar 1, as well as knitting together cooperative defense research and development efforts between Australia, the United States, and the UK in Pillar 2. The bill builds on important bipartisan provisions agreed to in the FY24 NDAA, which set the foundation for AUKUS, and provides minor technical improvements as well. Principally, it clarifies and enshrines the ability for AUKUS partners to re-export and retransfer defense material and technology within the AUKUS construct and through established and secure channels. The bill also provides other technical fixes and clarifications to the already strong bipartisan AUKUS foundational text, which continues to serve all three AUKUS countries. As the Trump administration conducts its belated review of AUKUS, many of us here in Congress on both sides of the aisle look forward to seeing AUKUS continue forward. This bill is a helpful contribution to its shared goals. I encourage my colleagues to join in supporting this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from California, the sponsor of this fine piece of legislation, Representative Kim.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again, my colleague, Representative Baumgartner, for yielding. I rise in strong support of my bill, H.R. 4233, the AUKUS Reform for Military Optimization and Review Act, or ARMOR Act. The ARMOR Act strengthens defense collaboration and trade among Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, which make up the AUKUS Trilateral Security Partnership. Since its inception in 2021, AUKUS has been key to our collective defense strategy, promoting cooperation on cutting-edge technologies like nuclear-powered submarines, artificial intelligence, and hypersonic systems. Unfortunately, outdated export controls and bureaucratic hurdles currently hinder the efficient sharing of critical defense technologies among our trusted partners. H.R. 4233 addresses these challenges by facilitating quicker, more secure transfers of defense materials while preserving critical protections for sensitive technologies. Specifically, it expands the expedited licensing to include retransfers, removes the congressional notification requirement on certain AUKUS transfers, requires a report on implementation of expedited review for export licenses, and requires an annual review of the excluded technology list to ensure the list is relevant and aligned with AUKUS goals. The Indo-Pacific faces growing challenges, and the unholy alliance is growing more brazen and aggressive. This week, Xi Jinping is hosting Iran, North Korea, Russia, and other hostile actors for a military parade. They are clearly sending a message to the United States and our allies that they are more united than ever. So time is of essence. We need to expedite the AUKUS partners' access to markets and make sure this defense pact is working as intended. Bureaucratic delays to the AUKUS agreement undermine our ability to counter threats and to maintain technological and defense superiority. I urge my colleagues to support this bill to send a strong message to our adversaries and friends alike that the United States is serious about preserving a free and open Indo-Pacific with our allies. I want to thank Arms Sales Task Force co-chairs, Representative Zinke and Representative Dean, for leading this bill with me. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Representative Madeline Dean.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Baumgartner, Representative Castro. I rise in support of H.R. 4233, the Armor Act, legislation that I was proud to work on with Representative Kim and Representative Zinke. AUKUS was a historic initiative launched under the Biden administration. It is an example of the collective strengths of the United States, Australia, and the UK. It exemplifies our commitment to working as allies, partners, to positively contribute to security, defense security around the world, including leveraging our shared capabilities to shape a free and open Indo-Pacific and to counter the rising threat China poses. I recently returned from a bipartisan, bicameral CODEL to Australia and the Indo-Pacific, and all were eager to build on the AUKUS framework. This legislation will strengthen the AUKUS collaboration and joint operability. It clarifies that re-exports and retransfers within the geographic territory of the United States, UK, and Australia are permitted under the previously exempted defense trade provisions. Importantly, it also preserves Congress's oversight authority and continues to ensure the protection of the most sensitive technologies that underpin our security. I am grateful to have worked with Representative Kim on this bipartisan effort to support our allies and bolster our shared defense. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill as well. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I have no more speakers and will continue to reserve until the gentleman yields back his time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purposes of closing.
The gentleman is recognized.
I applaud the sponsor and co-sponsors of the bill for their work on this legislation. We should be working more closely together with allies that share our values. That's the central idea behind the AUKUS agreement and the driving principle of this legislation. I strongly support it, and I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the AUKUS partnership is foundational to our global defense strategy. We must ensure it is implemented as it was intended. I am proud to support this legislation to improve existing AUKUS law, and I urge my colleagues to join me. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4233? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended and the bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2635.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2635, a bill to support the human rights of Uyghurs and members of other minority groups residing primarily in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region and safeguard their distinct identity and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I'd also like to yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Was recognized.
I rise today in strong support of Representative Young Kim's Uyghur Policy Act of 2025. The Chinese Communist Party continues to commit genocide against the Uyghur people in Xinjiang. Over 1 million Uyghurs are held in mass detention camps where they face torture, forced labor, constant surveillance, and forced sterilization. This is not just about abuse, it's a systemic campaign of genocide. The Uyghur Policy Act pushes back. It directs the Secretary of State to prioritize support for the Uyghurs and other persecuted groups, and to work with allies to pressure China to close these camps. It also urges U.S. leadership at the United Nations to ensure China's human rights abuses so that they are not ignored or silenced. America must lead with moral clarity. We must stand for human rights and against genocide. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2635 to support the human rights of Uyghurs, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
I'm a proud supporter of Representative Kim's Uyghur Policy Act. The House Foreign Affairs Committee has played an important leadership role in pushing for the protection of Uyghurs and other minorities in Xinjiang in the face of genocide and forced labor, as my colleague mentioned. In the last few years, the Congress and the House Foreign Affairs Committee have prioritized this issue, including marking up and enacting the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, thanks in large part to Representative Jim McGovern and Speaker Emerita Pelosi's leadership. But our work is far from done because Beijing's repression continues. The legislation before us today is a strong bipartisan bill. I hope it sends a clear signal to the Trump administration about Congress's intent. So far, the administration has cut congressionally authorized programs that support human rights in China, including initiatives empowering Chinese and Uyghur-related diaspora groups to combat transnational repression and defend religious freedom. And despite the fact that Radio Free Asia helped break the story about China's program of detention, re-education, and forced labor, this administration is trying to close Radio Free Asia as we speak. It has shut down the only independent Uyghur language service in the entire world. So, I thank Representative Kim and Representative Bera for their leadership on this bill and hope this administration reverses course. These cuts aid the CCP, not the victims of their abuse or the American people. I encourage my colleagues to join in supporting this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from California, the sponsor of this legislation, Representative Kim.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleague, Representative Baumgartner, for yielding and for managing the floor debate today. I rise in strong support of my bill, H.R. 2635, the Uyghur Policy Act. The Uyghur Policy Act comes at a very important time. The Chinese Communist Party continues to deny its genocide against the Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities. But we know that forced sterilization, forced labor, brainwashing, and torture is rampant in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Despite exposure of the CCP's crimes, Xi Jinping is doubling down. A civil society investigation uncovered that the CCP's harassment and forced transfer of Uyghur workers is more pervasive than previously thought, with individuals relocated over 2,000 miles away from the Uyghur region. Meanwhile, Uyghur human rights advocates and family members of detainees are intimidated and harassed by the CCP's transnational repression and espionage campaigns abroad. The fact that this happens here on U.S. soil is unacceptable and threatens our homeland. The Uyghur Policy Act directs the Secretary of State to lead all U.S. governmental policies and programs that support Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minority groups in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. It counteracts transnational repression against the Uyghur diaspora and creates reporting mechanisms for Uyghur victims. It also works to expose and disrupt Beijing's state-sponsored forced labor programs that exploit Uyghurs to dominate vital industries. This includes the cotton industry, where more than 20% of the world's cotton is a product of a Uyghur forced labor. We need to make sure our economy is not subsidized by the CCP's human rights abuses. The United States must show through words and through actions that we will have Uyghurs' backs in their fight against the CCP's tyranny. We must leverage the U.S. soft power, garner international support for Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities, and equip the State Department with the tools that it needs to effectively fight against Xi Jinping's genocidal campaign. I thank my colleague, Representative Ami Bera, for leading this bipartisan legislation with me, and I urge my colleagues to support it. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm ready to close if there are no other speakers from the other side.
Reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and will continue to reserve until the gentleman yields back his time.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purposes of closing.
Gentleman is recognized.
I'm proud to champion the protection of Uyghurs as a member of Congress. But let me point out someone who was also a fierce champion of the Uyghurs, perhaps their strongest supporter across the Capitol, and that is our now Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Then Senator Rubio gave an important speech in the Senate to get the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act over the finish line just a few years ago in 2021. But now, as Secretary, he's overseen drastic cuts to religious freedom and human rights programming that helps the Uyghurs. I hope that this bill augurs a return to Senator Rubio rather than this, what is a disheartening and non-strategic policy that we've seen from the State Department today. I strongly support this legislation and encourage my colleagues to do so as well. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to join me in passing the Uyghur Policy Act of 2025 to increase awareness and advocacy of the Uyghurs. We cannot be silent in the face of genocide. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2635? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, with 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
Be conducted as 5-minute votes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4216 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 4216, a bill to direct the Secretary of State in coordination with the Secretary of Defense to carry out a review of the list of defense articles and services required to be transferred under the Foreign Military Sales Program as opposed to direct commercial sales, FMS-only list.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. Have all members voted? On this vote, the yeas are 395, the nays are 20, 0 recorded as present. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 747 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 747, a bill to impose sanctions with respect to Chinese producers of synthetic opioids and opioid precursors, to hold Chinese officials accountable for the spread of illicit fentanyl and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 407, the nays are 4. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.